The movie begins by telling the story of a happy family living in a beautiful residential area. The husband's name is Don, and the wife is named Mona. They have 2 children named Allison and Andrew. Quickly, Mona's dominant attitude becomes noticeable. She has an overbearing behavior and wants everything you say to be fulfilled. Her relationship with her husband is very rigid, and everything is scheduled according to her will. Their days are far from joyful because Mona has an excessive obsession with her children always being winners, even if it has to be achieved in a bad way. On the other hand, Don is quite depressed and unhappy with the situation, since Mona often refuses to kiss him. This is because Mona is someone with many aspirations and has everything meticulously planned, including the available time to kiss. Don, for his part, chooses to be patient and accept his life circumstances under the pretext of maintaining peace in his family. Don works as a manager in a fairly large furniture store, which was built with funds provided by Mona's parents, making Mona technically the owner of the store. One day, the store hires new employees, and a woman named Dusty appears for an interview at the store. Don seems to be attracted to Dusty from the moment he meets her. Additionally, he is the employee and neighbor of Don, who tells him to accept the woman because he needs something to look at to distract himself from his stressed marriage. Meanwhile, on another side, a man who appears to have just killed someone is watching the furniture store's commercial on television. It turns out that this man and his gang have started tracking Don and his wife's whereabouts and activities. Don continues to spend boring days with his wife until one day he finally decides to have an affair with Dusty, with whom he has a more intimate relationship, while his relationship with Mona becomes less interesting. Everything goes well at first, and Don is able to hide his affair from Mona until one day Don's family organizes a party where Dusty brings the bad news that she is expecting a child. Don is surprised to learn this because Dusty had been taking contraceptive pills. He asks her not to have the baby, but Dusty refuses to abort since she really wants to have children later. Don meets with Les and asks for some advice about Dusty's pregnancy. Les suggests that he give Dusty some money to keep her quiet and to abandon Don's life because he believes that women like Dusty are the type that seek well-established men to blackmail them. Indeed, this is correct. On the other side of the story, Dusty is with her lover, a gangster named Murphy, the man who killed the other person. Murphy had assigned Dusty the task of attracting wealthy men so they could take part of his wealth. However, this time it seems that Dusty really likes her target. The next day, Les follows the advice and gives Dusty $13,000 with the aim of ending their relationship and never seeing each other again. But Dusty refuses to accept it because she feels she is being treated like just anyone. At this point, Don is quite worried because he fears that his mistake will destroy his home, meaning losing his children and that Mona will act even more out of control. However, the extortion doesn't work because the $13,000 is not enough for Murphy. So he orders Dusty to ask Don for more money. This time, Dusty decides to ask for $25,000, which is considerably higher than the previous amount. The only problem is that Don no longer has money and doesn't know how to get rid of the problem because Dusty continues to blackmail him. Don finally decides to be honest with his wife and tells Mona everything he has done. Surprisingly, she seems a little calm and responds in an unexpected way, asking him if he still loves her. Don replies that he loves her very much and loves his children, and that he would do anything to correct his mistake. Mona, showing her darker side, tells Don that he has to kill Dusty to stop her from extorting him. Mona claims that anyone who dares to disturb the integrity of her family will die by her hands. Later, Dusty calls Don for the $25,000, and Mona tells him to accept and arrange a meeting because if he doesn't, Tony, Don, will lose her and their children. Therefore, Don has no choice but to accept Mona's plan and kill Dusty, but he doesn't have the heart to do it. The next day, Mona continues to pressure Don to commit the murder and even prepares a high-dose drug for Don to use against Dusty to kill her. However, she gets angry when she sees that Don is scared and convinces him to fight the people trying to destroy his family. Don, having no other option, is forced to follow his wife's plan. Later that day, Dusty arrives and is received by Don, who gives her the drink with the drug. Dusty begins to feel strange and realizes she has been drugged when she finally collapses. A woman appears and tells him to put Dusty in the trunk when they get home. Don overcomes his fear and cannot continue with the plan. He is surprised to see that Dusty is still alive. However, Mona laughs and tells Don to go get the hammer. She hands it to him and asks him to correct his mistake. But Don is scared. So Mona hits Dusty with the hammer, then they take her to the garage and Mona begins to dismember Dusty's body. Don cannot bear to see all that and runs to the bathroom where he starts crying. On the other hand, Murphy starts to suspect that something bad has happened because Dusty has been missing for several days and hasn't been reported. The next day, when Don arrives home from work, he panics upon seeing Murphy talking to his son outside the house. It turns out Murphy tells Don to meet with him because he wants to know Dusty's whereabouts. When Don meets Murphy at a club, Murphy immediately asks about Dusty. But Don, who cannot lie, says he gave Dusty the money and doesn't know where she went. However, Murphy doesn't fully believe him and tells him he must give him $25,000 by tomorrow or he will do bad things to his wife and children. After the meeting, Mona tells Don that they must exhume Dusty, go to the gangster's house, and has a plan to deal with the mobsters during the night. They go to Murphy's house, and Mona enters the house and places Dusty's body parts, including the decapitated head, in the refrigerator. However, not long after, one of the gangsters arrives with a woman, so Mona quickly kills them both with a kitchen knife she took from the house. Once Mona leaves the house, the man who is still alive calls Murphy and tells him what happened at his house. On the other hand, Mona calls the police to report the disturbance coming from Murphy's house. As soon as Murphy arrives at his home, he is surprised to see all the chaos Mona has caused and also discovers Dusty's remains in the refrigerator that Mona had placed there. At this moment, he realizes he has fallen into a trap since all the evidence of the murder points to him. At the same time, the police arrive and his man is shot dead by them. However, Murphy manages to escape under the house through a secret door. Meanwhile, at Don's house, he becomes curious about his wife and tries to ask Mona about her past. He thinks she might have experienced some traumatic or tragic event when she was a child, which could have influenced her current behavior. But Mona reacts unexpectedly, becoming very emotional. She tells him that her parents are perfect and have never hurt her. Then she swears to Don that if he asks her anything like that again, she will murder and mutilate him, just as she did with Dusty. This scares him, and he thinks Mona's going crazy since she now plans to get rid of Les's son, who has a great physique and often beats his son in all games. The next day, the police arrive at Don's house and inform him of the death of his employee Dusty. They also tell him they have managed to capture the culprits, but one of them has disappeared. However, the reason the officer was there was that someone informed him that Don had been seen at Dusty's house. Don has no choice but to confess to the police that he had an affair with her and that her boyfriend blackmailed him to prevent him from telling his wife. The police understand the situation and sarcastically tell him that they don't want to find another corpse without Mona's entire body. During their conversation, a neighbor's dog suddenly enters his garage, and an irritated Mona warns them that she doesn't want to see the dog on her property again. During Andrew's birthday celebration, Don discovers that Mona killed the neighbor's dog and placed the corpse in the refrigerator. He also observes his wife's behavior when their son is losing to Les's son while trying to break the piñata. It was a healthy competition, but as a result, Mona gets angry and says the competition is unfair because she believes Les's eldest son has been taking steroids. Following this, she insults another child's mother, making her cry, and at that moment, her daughter Allison takes the stick from her brother and quickly breaks the unicorn until it's crushed. Don realizes that Allison is Mona's favorite daughter and that Mona always treats her better than Andrew, fearing that his daughter will resemble Mona in the future. Finally, after thinking about the events, Don decides to end all of his wife's madness. He rigs the lamp to cause a short circuit, resulting in a spark. After conducting some tests, he opens the gas cylinder valve to let the gas escape and fill the garage's air. Then he asks Mona to go to the garage's refrigerator and bring some meat while he goes to check the grill. Mona heads to the garage and Don quickly leaves, pretending that nothing is happening. Meanwhile, when Mona arrives at the garage and turns on the light, the lamp sparks, and shortly after, the room explodes, killing Mona. After everything is over, Don moves to a new house where he begins a new life with his children. With his wife's fortune, he and his children now live happily under the rules imposed by a controlling wife, including the fear of being murdered by her. The movie doesn't end there, as the police have yet to arrest Murphy, who is still on his motorcycle. Finally, 2 gunshots and some screams are heard.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.